Welcome to Voices, an educational speaker series sponsored by Vision Loss Alliance of New Jersey. The voices you hear in this series will provide you with information, practical education, tools, and available resources to help you manage tasks in your everyday life. Tonight, we are excited to welcome Brittani Brendel, who will be discussing a timely and empowering presentation on setting boundaries and providing consent. During this conversation, Brittani will lead a thoughtful conversation around physical boundaries, consent, and personal space, social and emotional boundaries in conversations and social settings, as well as practical strategies to set healthy boundaries and protect your safe space. Before we begin, I would like to share Brittani's bio. Brittani is a passionate social work student, group facilitator, and lifelong member of the blindness community. She brings a deep insight from her lived experience as a blind individual, as well as her background in advocacy, psychology, and community engagement. Before I formally introduce you to Brittani, let's review the Zoom protocols for this evening. Brittani encourages and welcomes questions, comments, and discussion. When she cues you and it's time, we ask that you use the raise your hand feature. For those of you who dialed in, the raise your hand feature is *9. *6 will mute and unmute you, giving you the opportunity to ask your question. If you are on a computer, Alt-Y to raise your hand, Alt-A is the mute and unmute command. Using a Mac, Option+Y is the keyboard shortcut to raise or lower your hand. Alt+A will mute and unmute you. Using the Zoom app on the iPad, move to the top right, select the More option, and flick down to the Raise Hand. On the iPhone, this feature is located at the bottom of the screen on the right side. And the voice for this evening, Brittani Brendel.
Hey everyone, I'm Brittani, and it's really good to be here. I'm so excited for tonight. So tonight is all about keeping our safe space. So we're going to be talking about boundaries, and we're going to be talking about consent. And I'll just kind of give you the basic rundown of how this is going to go. So I definitely want this to be really discussion oriented. We're going to go through some content about different types of boundaries, social, emotional, physical boundaries. We're going to be talking about consent. And as we go through, I really do encourage you to share your thoughts. There might be a time when I might, ask a certain question or, something along those lines, or might, cue you to give your thoughts. But anytime really, if there is, something that sticks out to you as I'm saying something, feel free to raise your hand and stop me. And I would love to hear any of your thoughts or things that you would like to share throughout this. So we're going to go through the content. We're going to have some discussion along the way. And toward the end, I want to do a little bit of an activity. I wrote up a couple little scenarios surrounding boundaries and consent. And I want to go through some of those, and we'll discuss them, and we'll kind of talk about, what could this person have done differently, so on and so forth. So that's kind of how this is going to work. And so let's start to dive into it. So when we're talking about boundaries, we gotta really define that, because this is the fundamental stuff. And really all a boundary is it is what makes us feel safe and respected on a physical level. So maybe a physical boundary kind of thing is your personal space. That just has to do with, where you are physically in space in relation to other people. And then we have more social and emotional boundaries, and then kind of a subsetting of conversational boundaries. And that really has to do with protecting your emotional energy and making sure that we feel safe interacting with people. So pretty much the way that we're going to think of boundaries, imagine you just have this bubble all around you, right? And pretty much this bubble is just everything that encompasses within this bubble is where you feel safe and secure. And everyone has different bubbles. and every bubble's a different shape, different size. You know, maybe some people's bubbles or boundaries are more flexible than others. You know, it all kind of depends on your personal feelings and personal comfort level. And there also might be different bubbles for different contexts. So for example, you might have a different boundary in across different relationships. So, you know, you maybe wouldn't necessarily, I mean, maybe you would, and you know, everyone is different, but just as a scenario, you might not want your coworker to randomly come up to you and hug you just out of nowhere. But maybe with your best friend, that's something that you're used to doing. So it's all about context. So when we think about these bubbles, there are ways that people violate these bubbles. And when they do that, the bubble pops, right? When our boundaries are violated, we're not feeling that sense of safety anymore. We're not feeling that sense of I'm being respected. I have a secure bubble around me. We're feeling like that barrier was breached. Pop, you know, it's been violated. There's a breach that has happened here that needs to be repaired. So certain examples of potential boundaries that people might have are in relation to physical boundaries. Maybe you want to be a certain distance from somebody. Maybe you don't want to be too close to somebody when you're interacting. On an emotional level, maybe there's certain topics that might be triggering to talk about. And this might be really hard to deal with in certain conversations. Maybe someone is asking invasive questions, things like that. So this is really, I really like this kind of sensory way of looking at it, because you kind of see the way that the barrier can be reached when someone violates this bubble. So, you know, in relation to somebody violating the bubble of maybe someone gets a little too close in your personal space, pop, right? Or, you know, maybe someone is asking you way too much information and you don't really know this person and you're like, oh no, what do I do? Pop, right? That's another breach. So what we want to do and what our goal tonight is to talk about how can we protect our own bubble from being popped, and also how can we respect others' bubbles, because that's incredibly important too, because sometimes we can violate each other's boundaries unintentionally, and we want to really get into the ways that we can prevent that from happening. And that brings us into the awesome topic of consent. So consent is the way that we protect and respect each other's boundaries. Consent, consent is when you freely agree to do something without pressure and with the ability to change your mind. So, for example, you wouldn't necessarily just want to randomly show up at a friend's house unprompted because you want to hang out on a Friday night. You never know if they're busy or they have plans or whatnot, right? You would want to get consent first. So, you know, hey, is it okay if I come over Friday? Sure, why not? Or no, not this Friday. And then you wouldn't go because you don't have consent. Now, another option here is maybe you and your friend have an agreement. Hey, can I stop by every Friday on my way home from work? I would really like to hang out. And your friend says, sure, why not? And you have this ongoing agreement. Then that's consent as well. But here's where the caveat is. You have the ability to change your mind. So if maybe a few Fridays go by and you're starting to feel like, man, you know, I don't think I have the energy for this every Friday thing anymore. Maybe we should cut back, maybe do it every couple weeks or so. Then you might say to your friend, you know, hey, I'm thinking this every Friday thing can't stand anymore. Maybe we should cut it back to once a month or so. And then, you know, your friend, ideally, if they're keeping your boundary and respecting your boundary, would say, sure, no problem. And that would be the changing your mind. idea about consent. So I kind of want to hear some of your thoughts thus far. So in relation to bubbles and boundaries and consent and all this, I want to know, what kinds of things make you feel secure in your bubble, or maybe make you feel like, oh boy, my boundaries being violated, my bubble's being popped? And I just want to hear some of your general thoughts on that. Or if you have a thought about consent or anything else, an experience you want to share, go for it. And just feel free to raise your hands.
Yep, Suzanne has her hand raised. Go ahead, Suzanne.
Hi. I'll tell you one thing. Well, I guess there are a lot of things that really push my buttons when it comes to boundaries. And one thing though that I find myself thinking about a lot is that so often people ignore our boundaries and ignore our space and touch us and push us and pull us. And I think I was out going to a strange place today, and I think I was probably pushed and pulled by at least 5 different people trying to help me. And that kind of stuff I think can really get to you. But then sometimes you kind of feel like, well, even though it's not really my cup of tea, there just sometimes when I just let people violate what I think are my boundaries. And it's hard. It's hard to know where to draw the line, and it's hard to it's hard to negotiate sometimes.
Yeah, it really is. And thanks for sharing that. And it really is hard. And, as people with vision loss, we kind of have a lot of unique challenges when it comes to boundaries. Because, like you said, someone might pull you or just think they could just grab you and bring you across the room to a seat or something, just like your, cargo. And it's like, no, this is a person here. And we need to, treat this person with dignity and respect like anybody else. And yeah, and it really can be hard, like when your boundary is violated, to really know what to do sometimes.
I know for me, when I'm attacked, I'm hyper vigilant. So if I feel like someone's trying to, if I feel like attacked, if I feel like someone's trying to hurt me, I'll attack right away. Not because I want to hurt them, because I'm more scared of them than they are of me. When you're blind, it's easy to be taken advantage of. So that's why I do it. But I never want to hurt anybody.
Yeah, and it can be kind of like this impulse defense, kind of, to be hyper vigilant, to do that when we feel like we're being violated, or someone is pushing too far.
And Miss Ruth has her hand raised. Brittany,
go for it.
Yes, can you hear me okay?
Yep, you're good.
I think this is a timely topic because I've seen examples of boundary breaches at gatherings recently. I was at a gathering where it was of people with vision loss, but also their family members and friends were there. It was full sight, of course. My friend had gotten herself a cup of coffee at the buffet table. She's blind. She put a lid on the coffee. She starts making her way back to our table. She has a tapping cane, so she's doing quite well getting back to the table. And she's right next to her chair when suddenly from across the room, a woman runs from the other side of the room. She snatches the coffee out of my friend's hand, and she put it on the table and just, proud as a peacock, she thought she'd saved the day. Then she walked across the room and nodded, and nobody said anything to her, but she just assumed we would really be appreciative. And we're just sitting there all looking at each other like, well, I said to my friend, doesn't that tick you off? And she said, no, not really. I think she was just trying to help. And I guess it's a matter of intent, but I do appreciate that she was automatically in the mode of not taking it personally. But as was it Erin just saying, I agree. I was hyper vigilant when I saw her coming across the room. I'm like, oh, she's gonna do it, isn't she? She's gonna take that coffee. And I try not to be taking it personally if she's not taking it as such. But it's tough because it comes at you when you don't expect it. You know, it's something that you have to get used to, but it's still hard after all these years to get used to that.
Yeah, and that hypervigilance is such an automatic response sometimes. I mean, I've definitely been there too. Um, and you know,
Yeah,
really
I
just,
hate when I have to do that because people think I'm the bad guy, and but in reality, that's not the case. Like I feel more threatened by them.
Yeah, I understand that. I know what you mean. Yeah. They are breaching your boundary. They're invading your space. I guess it's just a matter of like, there's a gradation of offenses in a way. I mean, some people will have to be talked to. Like you'll have to let them know that's really never okay. Don't do that. But this person, it wasn't my situation, it was my friend's, and she was absolutely unruffled. Her feathers were just fine. So I think I have trouble letting go, even though she was not offended.
yeah, and I mean that kind of brings things back to like the context idea, you know, like some people, like your friend, might have been totally, you know, unflinching about the coffee situation where, you know, you might have been like, "Ooh, like that doesn't feel right." And like both responses are, you know, are totally valid. It's just all about kind of the way that individual contexts and people kind of respond to things. And you know, it makes a lot of sense that you felt like that, and like that it was unsettling to kind of see your friend be fine with that.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It was unsettling. She was not bothered by it, and I was still bothered. I was bothered that she wasn't bothered. Isn't that a weird thing? I was bothered, but it didn't affect her. She said that's somebody, their intent was they're trying to help. So she left it there.
Yeah, well, thank you for sharing that. Um, any other thoughts thus far about popping bubbles or protecting them? All right. Well, let's dive into different types of boundaries and kind of different experiences that people might have, and especially in our community, in the vision loss community, you know, certain unique circumstances that we have that people can really violate our boundaries. So, physical boundaries. So, this has to do with your physical personal space. So, you know, maybe proximity, like we were talking about before, or, you know, where you feel comfortable, you know, having your personal belongings, so you know where they are and have access to them. Um, you know, and maybe you don't necessarily want unsolicited hugs. You know, someone might just come up to you and start touching you and be like, what's going on? And sometimes you don't even know who the person is. That's, you know, that's definitely not a good thing. Uh, being grabbed, you know, like we were talking about, you know, being pulled, or, you know, maybe you're walking through the neighborhood and all of a sudden, you know, someone says, "Hey, I'm going to help you cross the street." And before you know what's happening, you're halfway across the street and you're like, whoa, what's going on here? Or maybe someone is standing really, really close to you, and they're standing so close that you could sense that their face is right in front of you. You can even smell their breath. That is quite a thing. I've definitely been in those situations. Maybe another situation is someone moves your personal belongings without asking. And that can especially be a challenge for us being blind and figuring out where in the world did this bag go? Or, you know, where did this person put my cane? What's going on here? Or maybe people are placing objects in your way that could be dangerous. You know, you definitely don't want to be walking through your house and someone you lived with decided to put the ladder in the middle of the hallway. things like that. And it's really important for people to keep these boundaries and respect these boundaries. And we're definitely going to talk more about that, how we can respect each other's boundaries and protect our own. So now we're going to talk about kind of more social emotional boundaries. And the subset here is conversational boundaries. So there's a lot of ways that people can sometimes make you feel unsafe in conversation. And, if we are protecting our conversational boundaries, and if our conversational bubble is not being popped by someone, then we feel safe, we feel secure, we feel like we can interact effectively within our bubble, and, we can kind of touch bubbles with someone else safely and not violate and not pop each other's bubbles. So for example, some conversational boundaries. Maybe someone is trying to speak for you. Maybe you're at a restaurant and, you're with a family member, and your family member says, "Oh yeah, she wants the pasta vodka tonight." And it's like, "Oh, well, I could have ordered for myself." Or another option, maybe someone is continuously just asking you really personal questions, even though you've told them not to do that. And, maybe they're asking you things about your vision loss or some other really personal thing that you're not necessarily comfortable with. And again, context, always going back to context. You might be more comfortable sharing certain things and answering questions from maybe a close friend compared to, a coworker or even a family member. Sometimes family members can be invasive. Sometimes our close friends even can be. And it really just is all about the individual. And, everyone has different triggers and different bubbles. So another way that a conversational boundary can be violated is kind of the inverse of the invasive questions, which is when someone just decides to dive on into all kinds of details about their personal trauma without asking you or being aware of your emotional state, or asking you, "Hey, is this okay?" Again, this goes back to consent. We always need to be, getting consent and context. Maybe you would just dive into someone that you've known for 20 years. You might have the kind of friendship or relationship where you can just do that. But, if you're out to dinner with a casual friend or whoever it may be, and they just start diving into a topic that might be really triggering for you, then that's a major violation. That's a major pop of that bubble.
Hey, Brittany, this is Vicky. Michael has a comment he would like to make.
Absolutely. Go for it, Michael.
Thank you so much, Vicky. And Brittany,
You're
thank
welcome.
you as well. Going back to a little bit earlier when you first started talking about the personal space, I think it's important that we all understand, we know when our space is invaded, but we're also probably just as much at fault in invading other people's space in the same capacity, whether it's getting in their face, not realizing how close you are, maybe saying something that you shouldn't say, that may make somebody feel uncomfortable, whether you're friends or not. Again, it's something maybe between you and that friend, but if there's other people around. So this is kind of a double edge. It's for us to be aware of the invasion from others, but we need to be aware of our own ability to invade.
Absolutely. And it really is about both of those things. And this is so universal. All of these different boundary violations, they're violations that can happen to us, but they're also, like we were kind of alluding to earlier, we can unintentionally violate each other's boundaries. And it often does happen because, a lot of times relationships are about rupture and repair. And, sometimes we kind of cross those lines and accidentally pop each other's bubbles without really realizing it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Brittany. I'm sorry.
No, absolutely. That was a really great thought. And, you know, it's important to talk about that. So I just want to kind of check in again before we kind of dive into other social boundaries. Does anyone have any experiences or strategies, maybe just general strategies of how we can either protect our own boundaries or respect another person's boundaries? Or maybe we have a situation where, you know, we've had an experience where that bubble was really popped, and, you know, you want to share how you responded to it.
Brittany, this is
Anything.
Jackie. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go for it.
I can't seem to find the raise the hand feature, so I just thought, let me jump in. I had an experience, a very positive one that I've tried to remember with a minister of mine, and if I was sharing, and you know, I heard her do it with other people too. Someone is, you know, sharing whatever that. In this case, it was a problem with, you know, was part of my vision loss path. But instead of asking lots of probing questions, which sometimes you are so well intended, like you really want to understand, especially if it's a good friend or family member that you're close to, but the probing questions can be a little off-putting or intimidating. And I always loved that this minister said, "Tell me more about that," instead of asking specific questions, because I felt it gave me and other people, they get to choose what they share. They don't have to answer lots of pointed questions. And that's a technique I try and remember myself if someone is sharing something with me.
Hi, this is Hyla. Can I give you an example?
Absolutely.
I'm not sure where this fits in exactly, but last night I was taking a course online about the music of Beethoven. It was taught by a professor, and there were about 10 people, I guess, online. And when it came to me introducing myself, I mentioned that I became blind 3 years ago, and I used to play piano, but I don't play any longer. And they all went like almost on attack, like, why aren't you playing anymore? You could be just like Ray Charles or like Stevie Wonder. And I'm thinking, who are you talking to? What are you talking about? And I really felt like I wanted to respond somehow, but I didn't know what to say. It just felt so bizarre and absurd that all blind people are somehow the same.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's really invasive for someone to assume that. And, you know, it makes sense that you kind of just didn't quite know how to respond. And, you know, I think a lot of us have been in those situations. It's just like, ooh, like this does not feel right. What in the world do I do with this?
Yeah, it felt very painful.
Yeah, no, I'm sure that it did. And thank you for sharing that. And also going back to what Jackie was saying about, you know, saying, tell me more about that. I really like that strategy of kind of the open-ended question, because sometimes, yeah, if you ask something really specific, it might kind of accidentally disrupt a flow of what somebody might have told you. So just kind of leaving it open-ended and saying, hey, tell me more about this experience. It really just gives the person gives them an opportunity to just say whatever is relevant and whatever makes sense in that moment. So I really like that thought too, about that open-ended question. Any other thoughts before we dive in?
Hi,
I
everyone.
I
Hold
know.
on, Aaron. It's Elsa. Alyssa had her hand up before.
Go for it.
Oh, I was only just gonna say, like, sometimes I feel like people don't always know, like, they can't always verbalize where their boundaries are. And I'm sure you're gonna get into this, but I'm almost thinking about like the times when, like, I want to respect the other person's boundary, right? Because, like, maybe if I'm talking about something and they seem a little like they're withdrawing a little bit, or I'm just not sure, I just have this feeling, I might say something like, "Hey, you good? Do you want to talk about this?" Because it could be, one could say, oh, it's their responsibility to know their own boundaries, but it's kind of not. I feel like it's co-constructed. It's something that we can all do together, is help each other know and understand and make sure that we're checking in with each other. And I'm sure you're going to
Yeah.
cover that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that is definitely one thing that I wanted to talk about, was the importance of checking in with each other. And that really goes back to consent and just kind of making sure and checking in as we're having conversations, or if we start to kind of notice like something's a little bit strange or a little bit off, like, hey, like, is what's going on okay, things like that. And we'll definitely be talking a bit about that when we talk about, kind of ways to respect each other's boundaries and prevent these pops or violations.
Aaron, if you'd like to chat now.
I forgot. I lost my thought.
Hey, no worries. If you think of it, if it randomly pops in, then feel free to stop me, and I would love to hear your thought. All right. So let's dive into other social boundaries here. So, we kind of talked about some conversational things, and these are just some other kind of general things that might happen in different social situations, or just different situations in general, kind of interacting with humans as we have vision loss. So one thing that anyone can deal with, whether blind or sighted, is trouble saying no because of social pressure. And this can be a really hard one, especially if someone is really, really, really trying to get you to do something. And it might be something well-intentioned. A friend might be saying to you, oh, please, please, please come to this party on Friday night. I really need you there. It's going to be with my family, and they always fight all the time. And I really just need you there for support. Please, please go. And you might be thinking, ooh, I don't think I want to be in that kind of environment where people are arguing and things like that. I don't think I want to go to this party. But like, ooh, it's really like, I feel a lot of pressure here, things like that. Or maybe someone is making you feel pressured to accept help. You're trying to do something independently. Maybe you're trying to, let's say, get oriented to a building. And, someone kind of says, go this way or something, and kind of like pushes you toward whatever direction, even though they don't even know where you're trying to go in the first place. But nonetheless, and if you try to tell them, hey, I'm okay, I want to figure this out on my own, and they're trying to make you feel pressured to accept that help, that can be a major, major boundary violation. And they don't even have to be touching you. It can be, let me help you do this, please, let me help you do this, I don't want you to get hurt, so on and so forth. There could be any kind of pressure. It does not have to be physically somebody grabbing you and trying to help you. So now I want to talk a little bit about digital boundary violations that could happen. So your digital bubble is, the way that you feel safe and secure and protected when you interact in the virtual realm of things. Whether it be online on social media, whether it be the content that you interact with on the internet, whether it be just the way that you're interacting with people, calls, texts, any kind of digital media or virtual connections that you're having with people. So some potential examples of digital boundary violations, well, you might be with maybe one of your sighted family members, and might get a text message and they might just grab your phone and say, oh, let me read this text message for you. But that might be something very private that you don't want them to know. And, they are assuming that you need help without asking first. And maybe it would be helpful for them to, help you send that text, but it's important to get consent and to ask the person, hey, do you need help doing this or are you good? Another digital boundary violation, constant calls or texts. Man, I'm sure a lot of us have dealt with this. I know I have. When someone is just blowing up your phone, maybe it's your friend and, they want to know what you're doing. Are you still eating dinner? Why aren't you texting me back? What's going on? And that's like, whoa, that is a major violation there. And, at that point, it's definitely important to either have a conversation with that friend or you could always hit the block button. That's one good option in terms of digital boundaries. Especially if someone is continuously doing that after you told them not to, that is definitely a really viable option in the virtual world, which can be a great thing.
Brittany, it's Elsa. I echo what you just said on so many levels. Thank you for saying that out loud.
Absolutely.
Elsa, I think you muted yourself.
I am muted. Oh my goodness. Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know what you heard, but anyway, we have Naisha and Melinda with questions. So first, Naisha.
Go for it.
Good evening and thank you. I kind of actually I experienced this a lot because I'm a type 1 diabetic. I've had juvenile diabetes, so it's been with me all my life. And I really am intentional in taking care of my health and what I eat and at the times that I eat. And when you speak of violations, I would just I would say this, or I would ask this question because eating is a very social thing. And I like being social with people, but I may not be able to indulge in, especially in the holiday season. It happens to me a lot. Oh, you don't want this. Oh, have one. Well, just take this. And come to realize that sometimes they might feel uncomfortable that they're indulging and enjoying something and I'm not, and it can make them feel uncomfortable. So I put myself in their shoes. But then I do know that for my health and the way that I choose to manage my care, I set the boundary for myself, and I always try to kind of communicate. So I think communication is very important, I guess. And as far as how open you want to be concerning your own personal health or business. And so I let them know, I, to a certain degree, especially depending on who I'm with or the group that I'm with. But if sometimes we go out to lunch or whatever, and I enjoy being social, but because I know how I manage what I'm able to do with my eating and my health, because I wear an insulin pump and I have the Dexcom G7 and all of that, and I'm all checking my A1Cs, going to my doctor and everything like that. Some people, they don't understand that and they take it as offense, and you're not trying to offend them. But then I do have to understand that maybe their background, their culture, I know like in certain Asian cultures, if you go to their house and you don't eat, it's an insult. And so I do have to understand it, I guess, from both ways. I just wanted to add that to the conversation as a boundary. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that thought. And it's true, there are kind of complicated situations where, people for whatever reason, maybe it's cultural, maybe it's, just kind of a different perspective that they have, but for whatever reason, they just can't necessarily, and maybe they don't mean anything by it, but they don't understand, why you need that boundary. But, at the end of the day, like you kind of alluded to, you need to protect your body, and you set your own boundaries that are important to you, because that's really what matters at the end of the day, is that you're keeping your safe space. And, not everyone has to like it.
Melinda.
All day. Audio now unmuted. Alt Y.
We
And
can
now
hear you,
mobile.
Melinda.
Okay, I just wanted to lower my hand there for a minute so that it wouldn't still be raised. First of all, I thought that this topic would be a good one to come and hear about. But I remember talking about boundaries and safety issues. I'm on a system called Livewire, and I was trying to be friends with a person, a guy, and I gave him my cell phone number, and I've learned my lesson the hard way. But as soon as I did that, he started harassing me and all this stuff, so I had to change my number, and he was trying to make it hard for me to change my phone number so that he could continue to harass me.
Tom Brown has joined the meeting.
So, I just think that boundaries are, I had to set my boundaries and say, no, you're not gonna bother me anymore. I'm changing my number whether you want me to or not. He was calling me all kinds of names, and I remember one time he called me all hours of the night and would not stop. So I had no choice but to change my cell number. But
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely lots of people out there who do not understand how to actually connect with someone, and they'll do awful things like that, and that's really awful that you went through that. And thanks for sharing. But that's good that you were able to change your number and get rid of that person. I've had something similar happen where I had to change my number. This person was calling me from all kinds of random numbers and it would be like 4 in the morning, 4:30 in the morning, I'd be getting calls. And I figured out that it was eventually figured out it was one of my classmates who I was like casual friends with back in college. And yeah, so it can be really violating and just really and then you change your number, you got to get used to a whole new, you got to give it to everyone and all that, so it's just a hassle too. But yeah, thanks for sharing that. So right now I do want to get into one of our really most important topics, which is kind of strategies, respecting each other's boundaries and protecting our own. So everyone has the right to protect their bubble, even if people don't always like it, because there's definitely lots of people out there who are resistant to that. And it's good to know kind of ways that you can deal with those people, and either get out of those situations or repair the relationship or whatever it may be. So let's talk about a couple strategies to protect our bubble, to hopefully prevent it from being popped, or if someone has violated our boundary, a way to kind of repair that. So one strategy is I statements. If someone is making you feel uncomfortable, or someone is maybe standing too close, you might say, hey, I feel uncomfortable with this, or hey, I really need more space, I'm gonna step back a bit, something like that. It's assertive, but it's not aggressive. So the person is aware that you're setting a clear boundary. Now, of course, sometimes people might not respect that boundary when you made it the first time. So it is okay to repeat it firmly and as assertively as you need to. And, some situations might require a lot of assertiveness, and that's okay. It's not rude to protect your space. If someone is violating your right in some way, is, popping your bubble, and then, once you address it with them and they don't stop doing it, then, you absolutely have the right to be more assertive. Now, if you repeat your boundary and the person is still not responding to it, what can you do? Well, you could say, see ya, and exit the situation. So in terms of like a potential scenario, maybe someone is, out to lunch with a coworker, and this coworker is just asking all kinds of invasive questions about your vision loss. And, you told them, hey, I'm really uncomfortable with this topic. Let's talk about something different. This is really triggering for me. And maybe this coworker is just not getting it. And you repeat the boundary, you say it all, a couple different ways, and your coworker's still not getting it. You might say, all right, well, I think I'm going to start the afternoon early, a lot of work ahead, or, any exit strategy. And it's not rude to do this. It's not rude to keep your boundaries. It's just keeping yourself safe when you're being violated. So how can we prevent these things in the first place from happening? So we need to be aware, all of us as individuals, that we're not violating another person's boundary, because it is very possible. And it's, many times boundary violations are unintentional, and we do not intend for these things to happen, but sometimes we don't realize when we accidentally cross the line and pop the bubble. So one of the key things that I'm trying to drill into your heads tonight, we've been talking about it all night, is consent. Consent is so important. We need to ask for consent first. So for example, before just barreling up to someone and giving them a hug when you're not really sure if that's okay, say, hey, is it okay if I give you a hug? Or, instead of, just grabbing someone's personal, maybe someone has a bag on the chair you were sitting on or something like that. Or like, maybe not the chair you were sitting on, but like close to it, and you needed to get to it. Instead of just moving that bag and not letting the person know, maybe saying, hey, is it okay if I move this, if you're aware of who it belongs to? So just things like that. Another thing is, so as we brought up earlier, and as Alyssa mentioned earlier, checking in is essential. So for example, if if you're standing talking to a friend, sometimes it's hard to be aware of where we are in space. It's just, sometimes it's just hard to be aware of kind of where our bodies are in relation to other people. With vision loss, that becomes even more of a challenge, and it's understandable, and it happens. So, maybe just to make sure that you don't accidentally violate someone's personal space, you might want to say, hey, I just want to make sure, am I standing too close or anything right now? I noticed our canes were bumping. So, wanted to make sure. And that might be a good indicator. Like if your canes are bumping into each other, maybe it might be time for a check-in of, hey, do you need me to step back? Or hey, am I standing too close? So if you violate a boundary, well, that it's important to repair that, especially if you have some kind of relationship with the person. And it doesn't have to be even a close relationship. It can be a close friendship, family member, romantic partner, whatever. But it also can be just somebody that you're interacting with in the community. And these are people that we have relationships and interactions with as well. So it's important that we be mindful if we have violated a boundary. So, for example, if we cross a line and someone says to us, hey, that really made me uncomfortable, and explains why and so on and so forth, maybe with the hug situation, like, hey, I really wasn't expecting that hug, that really made me feel uncomfortable. And as a person who accidentally violated that boundary, maybe got a little too carried away and excited about hugging that person, the person who popped the bubble might say something like, I'm really sorry I did that. Next time I will ask you first. I don't want to make you uncomfortable. And it's just a matter of, understanding how we can do better next time and maybe not violate someone's boundary. Or if we accidentally do stand a little too close, we might say like, oops, I didn't realize I was doing that. And, please feel free to let me know if I accidentally, do that again, because I don't have good spatial awareness, so on. So these are just kind of some strategies that we can use to keep ourselves safe and keep each other safe and kind of prevent some of these violations. So I wanted to just do a quick little activity. And what I want to do is I'm just going to read a scenario. And, I wrote up like a couple little ones. I'm going to, I think, do one for time's sake. And so this is what we're going to do. I'm going to read you the scenario, and then we're going to kind of just talk about what could this person have done or do to assert their boundary, and what could the violator do to respect the boundary. So here we go. Sam is mingling after a support group meeting with his blind and visually impaired peers. One of Sam's friends from the group comes up to him to chat, but unintentionally stands very close to Sam. Sam is a bit uncomfortable with this proximity. So, thoughts? One, how could Sam assert this boundary? And two, how could his friend respect his boundary?
Don't be shy, anyone.
All right, I'll jump in. I think first off, if I were Sam, the first thing I would do is I would reach to the other person, maybe put my own hand on their shoulder, and distance myself, backing up, so it's not really too far, but at least I would be able to measure the distance between us, and maybe hold that other person just for a moment. And simply say something like, "Oh, you startled me," or "I wasn't sure who it was at first." And at that point, maybe you give them enough of by separating yourself. It may be that initial. They may realize that they were too close to you. Now, of course, if it was intentional, that's completely different. But I think in that scenario, I would distance myself by doing the same thing, kind of invading their space for a moment, putting my hand on either their arm or their shoulder, kind of taking that step back so I know exactly how far I am away from the person, and then trying to continue the conversation.
Thanks for sharing that. And, it's definitely an interesting idea to kind of you know, let that person know kind of what they're experiencing. And even just the part about even, you know, if it's unintentional, I mean, just taking a step back might be enough, you know, without even that physical contact, because that could cause a little bit more of a rupture, possibly, you know, if all of a sudden, you know, you guys are both doing that to each other, that could definitely cause a bit more of a rupture. But, you know, if you just took that step back, that might be enough in an unintentional situation.
Yeah.
Thank you, Michael. Miss Ruth has her hand up.
Yes,
Go
hello,
for it, Ruth.
Elsa. How are you?
Hello.
My love. I agree with Michael. I had to literally push someone once, and it was one of my son's friends when they were younger. They were like 10, 11, 12, and he was a close talker, as they said on Seinfeld. You know, somebody who gets right in your grill, and they get right in
Oh
your
boy.
face, just a few inches away. And so one time I realized it was probably because he was never able to get his parents' attention, so he always had to get up in their face, and that's the way that family operated. They were just close talkers. But I think I did him a favor, because I put my hand out to arm's length and I said with a smile, "Personal space, please, son." And since that day, he learned. I mean, he learned it, and he did it with everyone. I noticed that he did it with other people as well. So I think you do them a favor if you tell them the truth, and you can do it tactfully, but you own that space around you, and don't let anybody think that they're able to just like sublet it. They have to ask. They have to ask before they can come in.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a really good strategy. I think just kind of, I mean, literally just giving someone that nudge, you know, you kind of putting your arm out like, hey, personal space. And it kind of gives person that like physical awareness, like, oh, maybe I should be standing a bit further away. So that's a, you know, good way to go about it.
Anyone else want to share?
I don't know.
Elisha?
Yeah, go for it.
Oh, okay. Hi, Auntie Elsa.
Hello.
I don't know. For me, I would probably make it a little more comical. And in that way, I would probably, being as Sam, I would probably be like, hey, bro, I love you, but you're a little too close for comfort. I'm gonna just take a few steps back. I love you, but we need a little more space. Kind of like trying to get my point of across, but showing it kind of a little more lovingly, I guess, but also creating that boundary as well.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Just kind of giving them that gentle nudge. Thanks for sharing that. Does anyone have any kind of final thoughts in general? We're kind of getting down to the wire here. So feel free to share really anything that comes to mind that stuck out.
This is Alicia. I kind of came in a little in the middle. But I'm kind of familiar with setting boundaries. And it's a little more difficult to set boundaries, especially with, you know, a person that you live with, especially when they're a parent and they think
Agreed.
you're and they think you're putting the boundary in there as kind of more like a rule or a rebellion against them when it really isn't. And so I have to kind of like explain what the boundary is there for, what it's in place for. I have to break it down into details, just so they understand. Because when I was trying to put a boundary in place, they took it as I was just being just mean, pretty much. And I wasn't trying to be mean. It was just for my own well-being. So sometimes it can be a little difficult depending on the situation, especially when it comes to family members. So I just try to, especially with family, make sure the boundary is explained in a lot more detail than if like it was with, you know, another person. So
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when it's someone you live with. It's like you're gonna be dealing with them all
And
the time.
if they don't listen to you either, like they kind
Mhm.
just they just don't get it and they're kind of dismissive about it.
Yeah, absolutely. There are definitely lots of people who, do not necessarily know how to heed those nudges and pay attention to what you're saying.
This is Elsa, just to pipe in on this conversation, because I've had a lot of experience in the last couple of years in setting boundaries in my life. Clear communication is the best way to go. Just being, doing it with tact, and communicating clearly and directly. People that know me and are fond of me know that I don't like anyone standing too close to me when I'm eating. It's just, if they're standing and having a conversation, if you're over my shoulder and I'm not pointing anyone out on this call, and I say it with kindness and love, but I've had to express it to a few people over the years, and I just say, can you please step back while I'm eating? And you know what? As long as you do it with tact and care and kindness, people respond to it. It's not that you want to be mean to people. It's just you need to set what boundaries you're comfortable with, and that's okay.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not rude. It's not rude to keep your boundaries. And, in some situations you might be able to be more gentle and just say, hey, I'm uncomfortable with this. And in some situations, like like a couple of people were saying earlier, you might need to be more assertive, maybe even give them a literal physical nudge of putting your arm out saying, hey, you scared me, or hey, personal space. Those things can be really effective depending on the context.
Our program aide, Cindy, who many on this call know very fondly, she has an expression that says, Jesus needs space, and so do I. So it rings in my head.
That's a really good one.
My teacher made a comment like that, but she made it the opposite way because we were dealing with programs. Jesus saves, so why don't you?
Oh.
Alyssa.
Yeah, so another one that I've come up with that really helps with boundaries for me is like being playful. And sometimes I'll use this like in Uber, for example, or like a transportation situation. I'll have a driver who's asking me these weird questions about my blindness, like, "Oh, you can hear so much better, right?" Or this or that, or like, "How do you read?" Or like, and I might say something playful when I can't do it anymore, as if I feel like they can handle it, and if they feel like they're the joking kind of like, it's not magic. What? Hear better? What do you think? I'm a wizard? Like, and sometimes that kind of playfulness just kind of gets them to think themselves out of it and be like, whoa, wait, what did I just say?
Yeah, humor is a really good strategy. That's a big one for me too. Actually, that reminds me of a story about an Uber driver that I had. And first thing that he says to me when I get in the car is, so how do you speak? And
Wait, what?
Yep, I can't make this up. And I said to him, well, my eyes are the only things that don't work. And then that actually led to a really good conversation. And he was very open to learning about blindness. So it worked out. But yeah, that playfulness really can do wonders.
Wow. Yeah.
Melinda.
All day. Audio now unmuted.
One more quick comment before we end for the evening, but I remember years ago I used to give talks about Braille to school children here in town in Colorado Springs. And I was at a school one time talking to a group of second graders, reading them a story, and then brailing their names so that they can show their parents and or babysitters how their name looked in Braille. And I remember during the
And now lowered.
Thank you. I forgot to do that.
Mary Ann
Sorry.
Steenberg has left the meeting.
But
Keep going, Melinda. Sorry to interrupt.
But I remember one time when I was teaching a second grade class about Braille and everything, that I had one little boy who raised his hand during the
Georgia Hirschfeld has left the meeting.
question and answer session, and he asked me, he says, "How do you go to the bathroom?" And his teacher was like, "I don't think she wants to answer that one." I'm like, yeah, you're right about that one. I do not want to answer that one, you know. But anyway, I'll see you all next month.
All right. Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. And I don't blame you for not wanting to ask that one.
Yeah, really,
That's for
right?
sure.
Alt F4. Leave.
Or to answer that one, rather.
Does anyone else have anything they want to share before we wrap up? All right, I'm going to pass it over to Vicki to wrap up this call. I just want to say thank you, Brittani, for joining us tonight and sharing that very informative talk. You're getting a hand clap from Miss Liz, our program coordinator.
Oh, thank you so much, everyone. It was really awesome to be here.
Yeah, Brittani, thank you so much. This was a great topic. And like I believe Miss Ruth said earlier, a very timely one. It's important for all of us to remember this. So as a reminder, everyone, please subscribe to our VLANJ YouTube channel to hear this and all of our other virtual presentations. I hope everyone has a wonderful evening and stays well. Good night, everyone, and Brittani, thank you again.
Thank you so much. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you,
Brittani.
Good
Good
job.
night.
Thanksgiving.
Happy
Happy
Thanksgiving.
Thanksgiving.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.